Good afternoon, my beloved LinkedIn family. I'm David Vogel, founder of the Church of Unity, LinkedIn influencer. I'm here with Robi Damelin and Bassam Aramin. They are both, I pronounced your name wrong. And
Aramin.
I'm from Brooklyn, New York, so you got to excuse me.
Of course.
Both individuals are officers of an organization called the Parents Circle Families Forum. I was so impressed with what they do. I sent out an interview request for my audience.
Everybody who belongs to this organization is bereaved. We are now more than 800 families, and something quite extraordinary. Since October the 7th, only 3 families have left, and we have obviously a lot of new families since October the 7th, both Palestinian and Israeli. I think it's almost a miracle to say that we've continued working ever since then. We never stopped. I remember 2 days after the war began, we had a staff meeting where something like 20 staff in the West Bank and in Tel Aviv of Israelis and Palestinians. And we have 2 directors, one Palestinian, one Israeli, 2 of everything actually. It's a bit like Noah's Ark, because this is our way of respecting and not one side telling the other what's good for them. So decisions are made jointly. Everything is handled jointly. It can be very difficult. It's 2 very different societies. But this is our way of showing respect and no patronizing. So maybe 2 days after the war began, we had a staff meeting, and it was quite an incredible meeting because both sides had been exposed to their own media, and that created a somewhat of a parallel universe, as you can imagine. If you hear the Israeli media, it's one story, and you hear the Palestinian media, it's another story. And who's to say what the truth is, which is one of the problems with media these days. And so we had this conversation, which was quite extraordinary, because everybody was hurting and everybody was angry and everybody was fearful. And yet we managed to listen to each other with empathy, even if we didn't agree. And so that is how it was that we continued to work. Much of the work, I think for me personally, my reaction to October the 7th was very similar to when my son David was killed. David was killed by a Palestinian sniper, and I joined the Parents Circle very soon after that. When the soldiers came to tell me, I said, you can't kill anybody in the name of my child. I really spent many years trying to understand why, and this is how I can kind of link what I'm about to say about my own story to understanding how October the 7th happened. It didn't happen in a vacuum. This occupation has been going on for many years, and the anger, and if you were a child growing up in Gaza and you were 14 years old, and all you experienced every 2 years is a war, and you experienced bombs, and you couldn't run away, you had no shelter, and you watched your mother not being able to protect your siblings. You also have no freedom of movement and no hope. So what kind of adult will you actually grow up to be? And then if I look at the children who grew up on kibbutzim surrounding the area, they thought they were invincible. But then on October the 7th, they learned another story. Of course, there's so much trauma there, and all the villages that surround Gaza, which is Sderot, Ashkelon, Ashdod, maybe these names are not familiar.
Educate me. Robi,
So these
you
are
are
villages.
Israeli, correct? You're Israeli and Bassam is Palestinian.
So the organization is made up of Israeli and Palestinian families who've all lost an immediate family member in the conflict. We work to end the occupation. We work for nonviolence and reconciliation. And so that's the vision, the goal in the end is what we want. So I was talking about the children that grew up in the towns surrounding Gaza, where they'd been exposed to rockets since they were very small kids. So they are also traumatized. And what kind of adults are they going to be? Now we are faced with Palestinians, some of whom have lost maybe 50 members of their family in Gaza. and Israelis who were exposed to October the 7th. This is a very hard world and a very dark period. When I say I understand why, it doesn't mean that I condone. I don't condone any violence, but I can tell you that the man who killed my son, I found out because I wrote a letter to his parents saying that we should meet. His parents told us that when he was a very small child, the man who killed David, my son, saw his uncle violently killed by the Israeli army. Then when he grew up, he lost two further uncles in an uprising. That's the reason, that's what's called taking revenge. Didn't know what revenge is, so he's now spending probably most of his life in jail because they caught him. When you understand why people do things, then maybe you can correct them. I don't know. We have a wonderful group of young people who go to our summer camp every year. We have been banned from schools of late because of the government, but we are
Excuse me,
fighting that in court.
did you say you're banned from schools?
Yes, from
An
schools.
organization of peace. You
Yes.
made up parents had children on both sides killed, and you're advocating for peace, and you're
It's not
saying the
only
government of
parents. The government of Israel banned us from schools. We had been working in schools for something like 18 years. So we took them to court and actually we won. Then it started up again recently. So we have to go back to court. That's part of the work that we're doing. I want to give Bassam a chance to talk, but then I want to tell you about a project which we created with Georgetown University in Washington for the American public because of all the polarization that is happening. Maybe Bassam could introduce himself in the meantime.
Well, it's a pleasure and an honor to have you here. I read your background. You had a child that was killed by an Israeli soldier, yet you're sitting with people on the opposite side and you're trying to make peace, and that's so admirable. I am really a fan. So why don't I let you talk, because it's just wonderful that you could sit and break bread with the people that, from your perspective, killed your son.
Daughter.
I'm sorry, from the
Thank you.
people that killed your
Yeah,
daughter.
I lost my 10 years old daughter back in 2007. But I started to be peace activist 2 years before I lost my daughter. When I was one of the co-founders of Combatants for Peace, which is ex-Israeli soldiers and ex-Palestinian prisoners. We create Combatants for Peace 2 years before. Then after 2 years, I lost my Abir, my 10 years old daughter. She was my third child. I want to say that only on crisis or in the wars, you test your loyalty to your way, to yourself. So we are very determined to continue our way. Our way is to live together, to exist together, because this is our right to exist. No one will disappear. And because, especially because we lost our beloved one, we don't anyone to taste the same feeling. It's ongoing pain. It's forever. It's before and after. Then after decades, we will look back to ourselves as savage, as crazy. For what? So for the people who did, for their memory, we want to make peace. So everyone can enjoy peace. The parent circle, as Robi mentioned, she said 3 families, which is like a miracle that we continue to talk to each other, we continue to work together. It's the opposite. We gain more than 80 families, Israelis and Palestinians. Their pain is fresh, just happened now. So this is the humanity. This is our message in the parent circle, that we can be together. We have the same destiny. We do our best, everything we do, so we can look into the eyes of our sons and grandsons that we did our best to achieve peace. And this is what we are doing through a lot of our projects. And their goal is to make a crack in this wall, to spread a message of humanity, that we can live together, we can exist together. It's not a theory. Here we are together, side by side. So you can imagine when Robbie mentioned that we are banned from going to the schools as a
That's
peace
unbelievable.
organization. Yeah, this is the policy that we face. We are very dangerous. We consider to be fanatic, to be terrorists, to be traitors, because we talk about peace and reconciliation. It's against
Excuse
the...
me. The government is saying you are a terrorist, your
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
organization, because you're
Yes,
advocating for peace?
absolutely, yes. Not because I want peace, because I'm a terrorist, because I want to poisoning the minds of the kids. It's against the education system that they never know the other side. So this is also kind of democracy. We cannot ignore that. So this is the difficulties that we face in spite what's going on in Gaza and also the West Bank. We are under direct military brutal occupation with the settlers in the West Bank. They act as gangs, protected gangs. There is no laws. In spite of that, we believe in our way. We believe that as Robi have the right to exist, I have the right to exist, and we are not going to disappear. It's the opposite. For the memory of our beloved one, we must make peace and stop this bloodshed.
Oh, you're preaching to the choir. I'm for unity. I'm for peace. I'm an ordained minister. I talk about peace and unity every morning at 7 a.m. And it just amazes me because you're an organization that is made up of Israelis and Palestinians. And you're basically an organization of parents who have a child that was killed, and yet you're sitting together, you're making peace together, and the government of Israeli or the Israeli government is labeling you a terrorist organization.
No, they didn't call us a
No,
terrorist
yeah,
organization.
Okay.
Be very careful of what you say.
What do they basically
So
say?
what they basically are frightened of us going into a classroom and giving them a message which they would not normally know. If you go into an average Israeli classroom, say of 30, 17-year-old kids, this is the year before they go to the army. And this is probably the first time they ever met a Palestinian in their lives. I know that sounds very strange, but that's the truth. I asked them, who of you have ever met a Palestinian? Maybe 2 or 3 in the class. And who speaks Arabic? Nobody, maybe 1. And who's been overseas? Most of the class. So you see, there's this total cutoff. And that, in the eyes of certain parliamentarians, is dangerous. That we should come and show the humanity of each other. But I really wanted to talk because you have an American audience and because you do what you
Yes.
do every morning. I wanted very much to give you the message of how we are dealing with what's happening on your campuses and what's happening in polarization in America, because you are a very important country. We need a support that isn't an importation of our conflict into your country by you becoming either pro-Israel or pro-Palestine. You aren't helping us by that. You are just creating hatred between Jews and Muslims, even if you don't think you are. That's the end product of the importation of our conflict. And so we had, after October, hundreds and hundreds of people turn to us because we're an organization that brings hope. So we didn't know exactly how to handle all of this because it needs a huge amount of manpower. We couldn't go running around the whole of America all the time to give dialogue meetings. So we have been mentored by Georgetown University for many years. They have been a partner there. It's a wonderful university. So I went with a Palestinian to talk to the World Bank because they have a similar problem of the Jewish staff and the Muslim staff not talking to each other. So they are in Washington, so it meant we could go to Georgetown. When we were in Georgetown, we asked the president if he could help us create an online education program which could be open to the whole public. They agreed. It's not a course, but they did agree, which is wonderful. We have created a program. It's called Listening from the Heart, and it's a program where we filmed 3 dialogue meetings of a Palestinian and an Israeli telling their story, opening it up to question and answer, and there is a manual that goes with it, which actually gives direction to the person who's facilitating a classroom, a synagogue, a church, anything that they want to address. We've been, in the meantime, NYU in New York have become a sort of partner, and we are working together with them. They've just sent a whole group of Palestinian and Israeli young people to Prague, where they have a branch to work together. We have been to Harvard and to Columbia and to all the difficult universities where there were campus problems. Our message works. There is a website. You can open the website. I'd be very grateful if you would put that on your podcast.
Okay.
It's called Listening from the Heart.
From
Sorry.
the heart.
We've been working, actually, the Federation of Teachers in America endorsed the program, which is great because it means we can go to schools and to many campuses, public schools and campuses. That's working very well. I will send you a background of this whole listening from the heart, because I think that if people recognize that people like Bassam and I can sit in a room together and look for a way to end this conflict, then surely that should be an example for them.
Absolutely. We all want peace. Let me ask you this. What is the solution?
We all don't want peace, because if we all wanted peace and we really meant it, there's a price to pay. So, it's all very well. You don't have to, if you live in New Jersey, you don't have to compromise. But peace is not just a word. It's getting up every morning and being determined to do what you can, to understand, to try to make people realize the consequence of war, because people become numbers. Thousands of people have been killed in Gaza, thousands of people also in Israel, many more in Gaza, and many in the West Bank. But I promise you that all the people that are so concerned with the war and want peace wouldn't be able to give you the name of one child who was killed either in Israel or in Palestine. That's for me a very important thing, because we are the consequence of this madness. The new families from October are so filled with enthusiasm to end the war, and that is so admirable, because they lost their families. They were talking out to end the war something like 3 weeks after their family were burned to death. Or in Gaza, they lost 60 members of a family with one bombing.
So, David, you ask, what's the solution?
Yes, sir.
And before we answer, we need to know what's the problem. If we understand what's the problem, of course, we will talk about the solution. The problem is we have a military occupation, occupy the Palestinian land. The solution only by ending this occupation. Otherwise, believe me, we can continue killing each other another 3,000 years. No one will give up his freedom. No one will give up his dignity, his life. This is the main problem. This is our common enemy, the Israeli occupation. Whatever you call it, we must be free. We must live side by side or together in one state or 2 states or 5 states. Otherwise, we will continue to share the same land as 2 big graveyards to our kids, our families, and our people. Here, the role of the Americans, for example, to stop supporting one side unconditionally against the other side, because they are not helping us and not helping the Israelis. We continue to fight, we continue to die, and the arms dealers, they continue to win and to have more money on the expense of the blood of our children. This is the main point. To stop the occupation, then we can talk about peace. This is the only solution. Otherwise, to manage the conflict, they try to manage it 75 years. It doesn't work. What happened in the 7th of October, as we said, the conflict didn't start there. It's for us another wave. It was unbelievable. No one expected, but we always expect something bad will happen. Something will blow up in our faces as long as we didn't solve this problem. So the Hamas fighters who committed to the attack in the 7th of October, they were 10 and 12 years old back in 2014 when Israel invaded Gaza. Imagine now, we need to invest more and more hatred and more blood and more pain and wait for the next 7th of October. This is the point. Imagine if there is peace between Israel and Palestine. Nothing like this will happen because there is no peace. Don't trust the walls, the electronic walls. It fell down into hours. This is the point. Israel tried to make normalization with Saudi Arabia, with Iraq, with the Arab states, with the Gulf states, but not with the Palestinians. Only the Palestinians can be the guarantee of the Israeli security as a state. This is what prevents us, Israelis and Palestinians, to live side by side normally as human beings.
That's wonderful.
I just wanted to
Nothing
say,
more I could add. You have the solution. It just has to be implemented.
I think it's not only that. I think that there is an extraordinary energy now in America. I keep addressing America because I think that's your main audience.
Yes.
I can tell you it's very similar all over the world. I look at the students and I say to them, this is the first time that Palestine has actually been on the map for so many years. What if you actually decided to support one of the organizations? It doesn't have to be the parent circle. By the way, we also include children and orphans and brothers and sisters. It's not only parents. But what if they decided to support Breaking the Silence, Women Wage Peace, one of these organizations, and they put all their energy? I'm not even talking about money. I'm talking about moral support. If they would do that, wouldn't that be so much more valuable than breaking glass in a university? And that would really make a difference in my life and in Bassam's life.
I agree. You're preaching to the choir. I'm for unity. To me, I don't understand. Well, I understand what the fighting is about. It's all about hatred. But your
It's not really,
organization,
it's all about
fear,
hatred.
people have to forgive. Okay. Bassam,
Imagine why the Ukrainians fighting the Russians. In spite, they are very cute, very educated, very nice, very beautiful people. It's not suits the Ukrainians to fight the Russians. It's unbelievable.
yes.
Why the Vietnamese fight the Americans? It's not polite. Why the Jews fight the Nazis? It's not suit them. Where is an oppression, there is resistance. It's very normal. It's very human. So during this occupation years, people like us who believe in the end, we need to sit down and talk. Why we need to wait for the end? To lose thousands and thousands of our beloved ones. Let's sit down now and negotiate and agree that to shape the future together, because this is the only way. So yes, it's a create hatred and extremism. This is the problem. In the end, it's a create ignorance. People cannot see the other side. And this is the ignorance, because we are here. And from our side, they are there. We can see them. It's not going to help you if you don't see the other side, because the other side exists. Let us talk to him, deal with him, and again, shape the future with him.
I agree. Before we go, is there something you would like to add? Why don't we have each of you just close that in about 60 seconds?
So I just wanted to say something about forgiving. Okay, it's not a prerequisite in our organization. You have to be aligned to ending the conflict, to ending the occupation, and to nonviolence. And the vision is to create a framework for a reconciliation process to be an integral part of any political future peace agreement. That Bassam and I have decided to pursue the quest of what is forgiving is a very personal journey, but it's not forced on anybody. If people know about the conflict, they would also understand that 90% of the Palestinians would not have a clue who actually killed their child or their family member. So forgiving is personal. It's not part of what you have to do in this organization.
Thank you,
And
Robbie.
I
Would you
will
like to add something?
quote Martin Luther King always. He says, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Never keep silence. Always fight for human rights, for democracy, for the human value, for everyone. Thank you.
I thank you for allowing me to interview both of you. Again, it's an honor.
It's an honor for us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very
All
much.
the
Let's
best.
pray for peace.
Indeed.
Amen.
Amen. Have a